All right, so we have Walt here in the garage now, and there's a few things that we know need fixed for sure. So we have a whole list going right now in our heads. We need to kind of make that list a little more detailed. We know for sure we need pretty much anything that's made of rubber on this car. We're going to need it because it's all very crusty. We need seats, headliner, carpet, pretty much anything that makes the car more comfortable, we're going to need. Additionally, we need to figure out why it's making that noise while it's running. At the end of our last video that we did, it had dripping, and that was definitely gas. So fuel lines were something that I needed to replace twice. So those have been replaced as well, and it's not leaking gas now. So we do know that we need to do general tune-up stuff just to kind of get it into a fresh slate to see how it's going, figure out why it's making that noise, get all this interior stuff replaced. Like I said, anything that's rubber. This car, it's really patina, so we don't really want to change that. That's something we really like about it. When we bought it, we really liked that as well. So that's going to stay. We just want to make it more comfortable, but there are things like rolling down the window is a pain. That window falls down and comes up on its own. There's just all these little things that over 60 years, it just starts to be like that. And yeah, so we're gonna have a whole list to figure out what to do with this thing. And the door is really hard to shut too. And here's how this window rolls down. Oh, that sounds good. So another thing that I kind of forgot even is back in 2019, 2020, I used to drive this as a daily driver pretty often. I'd drive it to meetings that were, I don't even know how many miles round trip. And one day I was going to a client meeting. I was driving just fine, had the window down, it was a nice day. And all of a sudden I heard a pop, like a real loud pop, and it started making the noise that we heard when we pulled it in the garage on our clips. So that noise was new back then, and it used to run really well before that. We've done the brakes and everything, and whatever that like pop sound was not good, and it made it start to sound like it does now. So that's definitely one of the big items on the list that we need to figure out, and we'll see what that entails. If it means pulling this thing out, that's what we're gonna have to do, but the goal is to get this from being parked in the dirt to being able to be something that someone can use as a daily driver, like it once was for me. It's easy to kind of pick out some of the stuff that we know needs replaced. The first step though is to figure out what other mechanical things need replaced. So when I was last driving it, it was running like we mentioned, but all this maintenance stuff, so you have to adjust valves, change oil of course, change plugs and wires and all of that good stuff. So that's going to be our phase one of our list, is kind of figure out and assess it. So we want to get it to a stage to where it's better off than when we pulled it in here. So that's where we're at there. So we have our whole list. Based on phase one, phase two is going to be informed. We do know that we want to replace every fuel line. In addition to the back ones, there's fuel lines under the car that are rubber. There's some up in the front where the gas tank is that are rubber, that are all rotted, so we'll get those replaced. Depending on what phase one does, once again, the carburetor, we might rebuild it, get it all tuned up as well because it is carbureted. And yeah, depending on phase one, that second phase might get really big. Another thing, like in addition to all the interior, just making this a little cleaner, we've never had a spare tire in this thing. So that's one thing that we'll try to get, is another tire, a spare tire. That way, whoever ends up having this eventually has a spare. And then another one is the speedometer has only worked for the entire time we've owned it, probably about 20 minutes. And that's because this thing's a little lower, and it being lower, when you turn too sharp, it actually cuts the cable, which is right here. So it worked for a little bit and it was awesome. So we'll try to get that fixed too, because it's on something called dropped spindles. So we'll try to figure that out, get this all clean and all that good stuff. And I'm being very cautious right now about throwing anything away. This is obviously trash and messed up, but I want to make sure we have a replacement in hand first before we throw away some of these pieces that we might need to measure potentially, because we made that mistake before with our bus. So yeah, I'm not throwing away anything that came on the car. This carpet, I'll throw away all that stuff. So immediate next steps are part of phase 1 for figuring it out. So in the next few weeks, we're changing oil, plugs, using Marvel mystery oil. It's an old kind of trick that I got from another guy. I'll talk about that more when we do it. Adjusting the valves and then changing a fuel pump. I had a fuel pump on hand, so the fuel pump backed it up a few years ago and I never changed it, so it's time for that as well. So this first step is assess it and figure out what's going on, and then maybe this list will change and grow. This list is meant to be kind of a living thing, so we'll see how that goes, but the next few weeks are right here. So that's kind of what we gotta do to see where we're at.